The day you stop expecting care is the day you become unstoppable. Silence is not weakness. It is the birthplace of power. When you no longer need applause, you are finally free. Real strength comes when you stop expecting others to care about your struggles. This truth is hard to accept because we are conditioned from childhood to believe that someone will always step in, that people will notice when we are hurting, that our battles will inspire empathy and support, but reality often proves otherwise. People are not cruel by nature. They are simply consumed by their own burdens. Each person carries an invisible weight, and because of that, they rarely have the space to fully absorb yours. When you stop expecting them to, you discover that your resilience does not depend on the presence or absence of their sympathy. It depends on you alone. Think about how draining it is to live with silent hope, waiting for someone to ask, "Are you okay?" only to be met with silence. Each time that silence feels like betrayal, but it is not betrayal. It is reality. When you accept that no one is coming to rescue you, no one is secretly monitoring your pain, you stop wasting energy resenting the indifference. You take that energy and direct it inward, forging strength from solitude. This is not isolation. This is empowerment. It is the kind of strength that grows in darkness, the kind of strength that endures because it does not rely on applause. Machiavelli, though often called ruthless, understood this truth about human behavior. People's attention is limited, their loyalty conditional, and their concern fleeting. To depend on it is to build a castle on sand. When you stop waiting for others to validate your suffering, you remove the ground from which disappointment grows. You no longer cry out into a void. You learn to walk through it in silence. And in that silence you become unshakable. There is a hidden power in expecting nothing. If you assume no one will care, every act of kindness that comes your way becomes a gift, not a right. Gratitude replaces resentment, and your perspective shifts from feeling neglected to appreciating the rare moments of genuine support. But more importantly, you stop needing it. Your emotional survival no longer hangs on whether or not someone acknowledges your struggle. You stand firm because your strength is yours alone, untouched by the indifference of the world. This realization does not make you bitter. It makes you free, because once you stop expecting others to care, you stop tailoring your pain for their sympathy. You stop exaggerating your scars, stop performing your suffering, stop waiting for pity to soothe you. You learn that the only true comfort is found in endurance. The only real victory is in walking through hardship without an audience. And in that victory lies a kind of strength that can never be taken away. That is where real strength is born, not in being carried by others, not in being noticed or pitied, but in standing alone and knowing that your worth is not measured by the concern of others, but by your ability to keep moving forward regardless of whether anyone is watching. Freedom begins when you stop tying your worth to external validation. For much of life we are subtly trained to measure ourselves through the eyes of others. From childhood, praise and approval become the currency of self-esteem. A good grade earns applause. A mistake earns criticism. Over time, this conditioning makes us slaves to validation, chasing recognition as if it were oxygen. But the truth is, external validation is a fragile and unreliable foundation for self-worth. It can be given and taken away on a whim, leaving you exposed to the shifting winds of opinion. Real freedom emerges when you break this chain and realize that your value is not dictated by applause, attention, or admiration. It comes from within, from the quiet certainty that you are enough, regardless of whether the world notices. When you tie your worth to external validation, you live in constant performance. Every word, every choice, every action is calculated not for your own growth, but for the approval of others. You begin to live as a shadow of yourself, an actor on a stage where the crowd's reaction dictates your moves. This is exhausting, because people's standards change with time, with mood, with convenience. What wins you admiration today may invite ridicule tomorrow. To build your identity on such shaky ground is to surrender your freedom to forces beyond your control. But when you withdraw from this endless pursuit, when you say my worth is mine, not theirs to decide, you cut the strings that turn you into a puppet. That is when freedom takes its first breath. The hunger for validation is one of the most powerful prisons in existence. It whispers, you are only valuable if they see you, if they applaud you, if they admire you. And so people twist themselves into shapes that fit other people's expectations, abandoning their true nature. But this is self-betrayal, and betrayal of self always ends in emptiness. Machiavelli, though writing about politics, hinted at a timeless truth. Power belongs to those who are not desperate for approval. A ruler, he argued, must be feared rather than loved, for love is fickle, but fear is more reliable. Translated into personal life, this means, do not ground your identity in how much people like you, because their affection can vanish in an instant. Instead, ground it in your own unshakable self-respect, something no one can strip away. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking, do they like me? Do they respect me? Do they approve of me? And instead begin asking, do I respect myself? Do I approve of who I am becoming? This shift seems simple, but it is revolutionary. It pulls you out of the crowd and places you firmly in your own authority. You stop living like a servant to other people's opinions, and start living like a sovereign of your own life. Your actions, choices, and even your failures no longer need external justification, because they are rooted in your own sense of direction. And paradoxically, this self-possession often earns more respect than the desperate chase for validation ever could. Consider how fragile the pursuit of external validation really is. People may cheer for you not because they truly admire you, but because you amuse them, entertain them, or serve their interests. Their applause is often less about your worth, and more about their convenience. When you understand this, you see how empty it is to depend on their recognition. Real worth cannot be given or taken by the shifting moods of others. Real worth is a deep, steady current inside you, unbothered by the noise of the crowd. When you find that current, you are free, because even in silence, even in obscurity, you remain whole. This freedom is also a shield against manipulation. Those who crave validation can be easily controlled, because they fear disapproval more than anything. A single word of criticism can bend them, a single compliment can bind them. But those who have cut the need for validation are untouchable. They are not swayed by flattery and not broken by insult. They act from principle, not from the shallow desire to please. This independence makes them powerful, because no one holds the keys to their self-worth but themselves. To stop tying your worth to external validation does not mean rejecting all feedback or shutting yourself away from others. It means you learn to weigh their voices without letting them define you. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism becomes instructive but not devastating. Whether you are applauded or ignored, respected or mocked, your sense of self remains steady, because it no longer rests in their hands. That is the essence of freedom, to walk into any room, face any crowd, and know that their judgment cannot add to or subtract from who you are. Philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius taught this same lesson through Stoicism. They urged us to separate what is within our control from what is not. The opinion of others falls firmly into the realm of what is not. To be enslaved by it is to surrender your peace, but to detach from it is to gain mastery of your mind. Aurelius wrote that the tranquility of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. If your thoughts are constantly chained to other people's approval, you will live in turmoil. But if they are rooted in self-respect and inner clarity, you will live in freedom, regardless of whether the world recognizes you or not. In practice, this freedom looks like courage. The courage to speak even when unpopular. The courage to act even without recognition. The courage to build in silence, knowing that your work is meaningful, whether or not others see it. The courage to stand alone when necessary, without crumbling under the weight of being misunderstood. And the greatest courage of all, to define yourself, not by their shifting opinions, but by your unchanging principles. When you stop tying your worth to external validation, life becomes lighter. You no longer carry the unbearable weight of trying to be everything to everyone. You no longer bend yourself into unnatural shapes, just to fit their molds. Instead, you stand tall, as you are, imperfect, but authentic. And authenticity is where freedom thrives, because no one can take away what is truly yours. That is the quiet miracle of breaking free from external validation. You may lose their applause, but you gain your soul. You may lose their recognition, but you gain your freedom. And in the end, freedom is worth more than any round of applause, because it allows you to live not as an echo of others' opinions, but as the true voice of yourself. Power lies in self-reliance, and the ability to bear silence without seeking pity. At first glance, silence can feel like abandonment, as if the world has turned its back on you. The instinct is to cry out, to demand acknowledgement, to beg for someone to notice your suffering. But in truth, the ability to endure silence without breaking, without needing others to rush in with comfort, is one of the greatest marks of strength. Silence tests the core of who you are. It strips away illusions, it denies you the luxury of pity, and it confronts you with the question, can you stand on your own? Those who can endure this test without crumbling are the ones who rise above dependence, because they have learned to feed themselves with their own resolve instead of begging for nourishment from others. Machiavelli's observations about human behavior remind us that pity is a weak currency in the economy of power. People may offer it in small doses, but it is never consistent, and it rarely comes without strings. To rely on it is to place your strength in someone else's hand. And pity, unlike respect or fear, does not elevate you, it diminishes you. When you are pitied, you are seen as weaker, as someone in need of rescue. You may gain temporary attention, but you lose the very thing that grants lasting influence, the perception of independence. That is why self-reliance is such a formidable trait. It signals to the world that you need nothing, that your survival does not depend on their sympathy, and that you can weather storms alone. There is a profound power in knowing that you can suffer without broadcasting it, that you can endure without demanding comfort. This does not mean you close yourself off or deny connection. It means that you choose when and how to share, instead of bleeding your pain outwards in desperation. The Stoics believed that strength is not about avoiding hardship, but about controlling your response to it. Bearing silence with composure is exactly that. It is mastery of self in the face of indifference. The world will often remain unmoved by your cries, but if you learn to remain unmoved in return, you gain something they cannot take away: dominion over yourself. Self-reliance is not just about survival, it is about dignity. When you carry your burdens without complaint, you command a quiet respect even from those who may not speak it. People are instinctively drawn to those who hold themselves together under pressure. They may not rush to your side with pity, but they will recognize your strength. And recognition earned through resilience is far more powerful than sympathy earned through weakness. The one who depends on pity may gather attention for a moment, but the one who depends on himself gathers respect that endures. Learning to bear silence also sharpens your perspective. When you no longer seek pity, you stop filtering your choices through the lens of who might approve or who might comfort you. You start to act for yourself, not for an audience. In this way, silence becomes fertile ground for clarity. You see your motives more clearly, your goals more sharply, because they are no longer clouded by the need for validation. The absence of external voices gives rise to your internal voice, and in that solitude you find direction that cannot be shaken by others. The greatest leaders, thinkers, and builders across history were those who could endure being alone, misunderstood, or ignored, yet kept moving forward. They did not wait for pity to sustain them. They drew strength from their inner reserve. Their silence was not weakness. It was the space where they refined their vision, and often, when the world finally noticed, it was not because they begged for attention, but because their self-reliance had built something undeniable. Pity also comes with a hidden cost, dependence. If you learn to survive on others' sympathy, you will always need more of it. Like a drug, it dulls the edge of suffering temporarily, but leaves you weaker in the long run. You become addicted to being seen as the victim, because in that role you receive the attention you crave. But addiction to pity is a prison. It chains you to weakness, ensuring that you never grow stronger, never discover what you are truly capable of without help. Self-reliance, on the other hand, is liberation. It may be harder in the beginning, but it builds a strength that compounds over time. Each battle faced alone hardens your resolve, until the storms that once terrified you become manageable, even familiar. To bear silence without seeking pity is to embrace a kind of sovereignty. You are no longer at the mercy of others' willingness to notice you. You are no longer controlled by the ebb and flow of their sympathy. Instead, you become your own anchor, steady in stillness, unshaken by neglect. And paradoxically, this makes you more powerful in their eyes. For the world respects those who do not beg, those who endure in silence, those who refuse to be defined by weakness. This does not mean you never accept help, or never share your struggles. True self-reliance is not stubborn isolation. It is the ability to carry yourself fully, even when no one offers help, while also being strong enough to accept support without depending on it. The difference is in need. The self-reliant person can walk alone, and chooses to walk with others. The one who craves pity cannot walk at all without someone else's attention to lean on. That is the dividing line between weakness and power. Silence is often uncomfortable, because it confronts us with ourselves. Without others rushing in to distract us, we face the raw truth of our resilience, or lack of it. But if you can learn to sit in that silence, to hold your ground, to endure without flinching, you will find a power that outlasts pity. Pity fades, sympathy dissolves, but self-reliance, once forged, is permanent. It becomes a shield you carry through every trial, a steady reminder that your survival, your strength, your worth, are not conditional on anyone's recognition. Power lies there, in the unspoken strength of enduring silence, in the refusal to beg, in the dignity of standing alone. For when you need no one to notice, you become unshakable. When you stop chasing pity, you rise above dependence. And when you master the art of self-reliance, you no longer just survive, you command the respect of the world, even if it remains silent. Accepting indifference allows you to move strategically and live with clarity. At first, indifference feels like a wound. When others overlook your efforts, when they pass by your pain as if it were invisible, it can sting with the sharpness of rejection. But that sting comes only because you still expect them to care. Once you accept that most people will not invest deeply in your struggles or triumphs, the sting disappears, and in its place rises clarity. Indifference is not cruelty. It is simply the natural state of a world where everyone is bound by their own concern. To accept this truth is not to grow bitter, but to grow wise. When you no longer waste energy wishing for attention, you free yourself to act with precision, to see the world as it is, and to move within it without the fog of unmet expectation. This acceptance strips life of its unnecessary illusions. So often, we walk through the world, clouded by the belief that people are watching us closely, judging every move, measuring every misstep. The truth is, most people are too consumed with their own battles to give you more than a passing glance. When you embrace this reality, a great weight lifts. You realize you are not under constant scrutiny, nor are you the center of anyone's story but your own. That realization creates freedom. You stop performing, stop bending yourself to fit their imagined judgments, and instead act in alignment with your true goals. Clarity begins when the noise of imagined observers fades, and in that silence you gain space to think strategically. Machiavelli understood that clarity is a weapon to lead, to influence, to survive in the political arena. One must see people not as we wish they were, but as they truly are, self-interested, distracted, often indifferent. A ruler who expected loyalty or love as constants would be blindsided by betrayal, but a ruler who accepted human indifference could prepare, plan, and govern with sharp eyes open. The same principle applies to life. If you live believing that others will always look out for you, you will stumble. But if you expect indifference, you will watch your own steps, chart your own map, and be ready to adapt when the world offers silence instead of sympathy. Clarity grows sharper when you cease resenting this indifference. Resentment clouds judgment. It fills the mind with unnecessary anger. Why didn't they notice? Why didn't they help? Why didn't they celebrate me? These questions waste energy and blind you to the path ahead. But if you accept indifference as the baseline, none of these questions arise. You no longer burn time demanding what the world cannot give. You simply see, act, and move forward. This calm acceptance transforms your perspective. You stop being reactive and start being strategic. You no longer waste moves waiting for applause or recognition. You make moves because they are necessary, effective, and true to your aim. The Stoics too warned against the trap of false expectation. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people would be selfish, thoughtless, and indifferent, yet he chose not to be disturbed by it. Why? Because expecting it kept him grounded. If you wake each day already aware that others will not always care, then their indifference no longer surprises you. Instead of being hurt, you are prepared. Instead of stumbling emotionally, you walk with steady composure. And in that composure lies clarity, an ability to see opportunities and threats without emotional fog. Strategic living is born in this state. When you stop looking outward for constant validation, your vision turns inward and forward. You ask, what are my true goals? What is the best move in this situation? What resources do I control? What risks must I accept? Indifference clears away the distraction of seeking approval, leaving only the pure logic of action. You are no longer tempted to take steps just to impress others or win their pity. Instead, you act because it serves your long-term aim. In politics, business, and personal life alike, this is the mindset that builds empire. The one who can detach from craving recognition, moves quietly, strategically, often invisibly, until their results speak louder than any plea for attention ever could. There is also a liberating humility in this acceptance. When you know others are indifferent, you realize you are not the center of the universe, and that is a gift. You stop imagining that every misstep is catastrophic because everyone saw it. In truth, most people did not notice, and those who did will soon forget. This frees you to take risks, to experiment, to fail, and to grow without fear of constant judgment. Clarity emerges
because the spotlight was never really on you. Indifference, once accepted, becomes the stage on which you can move with boldness. The greatest strategists of history often thrived under conditions of indifference. They did not complain that the world ignored them. They used the silence to plan, to build, to prepare. While others wasted energy chasing acknowledgement, they worked in obscurity, sharpening their craft, refining their strategies, waiting for the right moment. By the time the world noticed, they had already built strength too great to be denied. This is the gift of indifference. It gives you space to operate without interference. If no one cares, no one is watching closely enough to stop you. That is an advantage. That is freedom. Living with clarity also means accepting that not every battle deserves to be fought. Not every slight deserves to be answered. Not every absence of care is a personal attack. Indifference is often neutral, not hostile. When you no longer interpret it as rejection, you stop wasting time defending your pride and start investing energy in building your vision. That shift from wounded ego to focused mind is what separates the reactive from the strategic. The reactive demand to be seen. The strategic act, whether seen or unseen, knowing that results, not recognition, define worth. In the end, accepting indifference transforms you into someone untouchable. When you no longer rely on their care, you cannot be weakened by its absence. When you no longer chase their recognition, you cannot be blinded by its presence. You move through life with eyes clear, choices deliberate, and steps firm. You engage with others, not from neediness, but from strength, because your path is already defined. Indifference no longer wounds you. It becomes the backdrop against which your clarity shines all the brighter. And so the paradox is revealed. The very thing that once felt like abandonment, indifference, is the thing that sets you free. Accept it, and you gain power. Embrace it, and you gain clarity. Live by it, and you move strategically through a world too distracted to care, leaving behind not complaints or demands for sympathy, but undeniable results. In the end, everything comes back to a single truth. The world is not watching you as closely as you imagine, nor does it carry the responsibility to care for your struggles. At first, this reality feels cold, but in its harshness lies liberation. When you stop expecting others to carry your weight, you discover your own strength. When you stop tying your worth to their approval, you taste the first breath of freedom. When you learn to bear silence without begging for pity, you grow into resilience that commands respect without asking for it. And when you accept indifference as the natural state of the world, you clear away illusions and move through life with clarity and precision. This is the Stoic reality. Machiavelli and the ancient philosophers understood so well. True power belongs to those who need nothing from the crowd, to endure without applause, to stand without pity, to move without recognition. These are the marks of someone untouchable. In such a life, you are no longer a servant to opinion or a victim of neglect. You are sovereign over yourself, and in that sovereignty lies everything: strength, freedom, clarity, and the quiet, unshakable dignity of one who is no longer at the mercy of whether anyone cares.